Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Understanding Bows with Bernd Müsing. My name is Doug Glanville, and before we begin this webinar, I would like to acknowledge that the Sydney String Centre, where I'm presenting from, is located on the lands of the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, and we pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Very quickly, a note, as you probably heard on your way in, that we are recording today's webinar, and we will be emailing everybody details about how to access the recording afterwards. Many of you would have signed up today to today's webinar because of your association with the Sydney String Centre. But for those of you who don't know us, the Sydney String Centre is Australia's leading specialist for violins, violas, cellos, and basses for all who wish to learn, play, and perform. My family started the business over 30 years ago, and we're still family owned and operated today. We are especially passionate about supporting all string players on their musical journey. And to that end, this is our first in a series of our Meet the Expert webinars, where you'll get to meet people from the violin industry who are regarded as leaders in their field of expertise. We're expecting over 100 people today, which is just amazing. So just out of curiosity, and so we can get a sense of where everybody is in Australia or indeed around the world, could you all let us know in the chat where you're dialing in from? So quite a few from Sydney, some Newcastle, Melbourne, Perth. I see Helen Tucky there. Hi, Helen. Down from Melbourne as well. Toowoomba, Queensland, Tassie, Shell Harbour, Yakandanda. Fantastic. Wow. South Australia, all over the place. Great, fantastic. Hey, what a great cohort. Fantastic. So good to see. No one from outside. I thought we might have had some New Zealanders there, but perhaps not today. Okay, tonight we are extremely excited to be welcoming Bernd Müsing. Bernd started becoming curious about bows many years ago when, as a violin student, he was struggling to play the Mozart G major concerto with the bow that he was using. At the time, he was head of research and development at one of Germany's largest bicycle factories, and he started to apply his technical skills to this problem. Years of research led him to believe that high-density carbon fiber could provide a solution to the problem, and the result was ARCUS bows. More than 2 decades later, and Bernd has done an incredible amount of research into the science behind why bows sound and play the way they do. His bows are so popular with musicians that ARCUS is now the largest manufacturer of high-quality bows in the world. We were thrilled to receive quite a few questions for Bernd in advance. And based on those questions, Bernd has prepared a presentation for you, but of course, he will also be taking questions at the end. If you feel the need to jump in and ask a question as we go, please go ahead and write it in the chat, and we'll do our very best to get to it at the end of the presentation. If you're feeling inspired during the presentation and you'd also like to book a time with one of our specialists to talk about bows further, we'll be posting a link in the chat where you can make that booking very easily. So without further ado, I would like to welcome all the way from Würzburg in Germany, Bernd Müsing.
So hello, everybody. I'm amazed, talking to you guys at the other end of the world. So it's a very good morning. No, very good evening to you. It's a very good morning over here in Germany. Actually, we're heading for winter. You're heading for summer. So yeah, the world is different, but still such a beautiful little place. And classical music is played everywhere, loved everywhere. And yeah, it looks like we share this here. And I would like to share with you what I've been doing about making it an even more enjoyable thing, a waste of time or whatever. No, for me, music has always been a very important part of my life. It's been saving my soul on many occasions, I have to say. And playing again is a very different matter than just listening. I love to listen to wonderful music. Of course, I go to concerts, but playing music is something else altogether, and only those who play will ever understand it. And the more important it was always to me to have a proper outfit. I started playing the guitar, so at one point I bought me a very nice guitar, and of course I never stopped playing the violin since I was a kid, and always enjoyed it. And then, yeah, as Doug just mentioned, somewhere in the year 1995, I've had a little extra cash in my pockets, and I figured, okay, now I'm gonna buy me a real good bow that does it everything, which I've been struggling with all my life, something really strong and light and nimble, and and it wasn't there. So I was trying many different bows, went to different shops, and they were all not really so much better than the bow I already had. And it really didn't matter so much how much money I was willing to part with. So, and being an engineer and somebody who was developing stuff like on a daily basis, I was going like, okay. It appears we have a little bit of a problem here. First, I need to understand the problem. Then I'm sure I'll find a solution, and then I'll find the right bow. So I tried measuring up stuff like what is the real tension here? What is the downforce that we apply on playing? And how much does it differ from one string to another? And when I go up and down the string, and when I play pianissimo and fortissimo and double stops and all that, and then the next thing I did is I tested my bows for the strings, for the resiliency they could supply, and all the other bows I had on approval. And I figured, oh, wait a minute, they are all too soft, all of them. Okay. So next step, as I was looking into the modulus of elasticity, into the Flächenträgheitsmoment, I don't know, all the terms in English. So I basically did a mathematical physical model on the bow and the string and the instruments, and tried to understand what's going on there. And I came to the conclusion that for a modern setup instrument, for a modern string, a wooden bow just can't do the trick. And so I ended up designing from a pure theoretical point what would be the optimal bow. And hell, I was so stupid. I had no idea what I was jumping in there. And it's been a journey of, well, what now? 23 years now? No. 28 years. And I'm still learning new things about the bow every day. So my understanding early on was so minimalistic compared to what I know now. And still I know that I know only very little about what a bow really does and how the bow really works. Though I believe I may understand more than pretty much everybody else about the physics and also the solutions. I mean, understanding, analyzing stuff is one thing. Turning your knowledge into a product is quite another task then. So that proved to be actually the much bigger hurdle in the beginning, to go from a design or a rough sketch, whatever I had in the early beginning, and from some calculations and analysis, into a product that I would be able to play and then maybe even sell. So just to lay out my starting point a little more in detail, how I got there. So I was not born on a heap of carbon fiber that needed an application. I was also not born in a family of bow makers that just needed a heir and successor. It was on completely free will. So I admit completely guilty in and tackling a subject from a direction that nobody wanted me to tackle. So and since then I'm creating chaos in the minds of many players, and especially bow makers and also violin shop owners, who first have to understand what is all this about, and in an industry or in a business where old is best and new is dubious at best. So strings, modern strings are accepted. So are modern shoulder rest and chin rest and cases. Modern instruments and bows are accepted only to a certain point. And I meet so many young players, and I was in the same shoes. I wanted a Stradivari and a Tourte, of course. I mean, who doesn't? And then, of course, I could do with a Guarneri and a Picard. Yeah, no problem. But who wants to play a violin that's made by your neighbor, and a bow by, his friend? Where's all the magic? Okay, but if we come back to music and really try to produce the best possible music for our audience, then the story changes, I believe. And that is my vantage point. I'm not so much looking at the antique stuff and all the history, but I really want to provide all players on this planet with the best possible bow. That is my obsession. Is that the right word? I don't know. My crusade, or whatever. So I have received a lot of interesting questions before this meeting, and I've arranged that into 4 groups, and I would walk through these questions that came from all you, and then jump into these 4 different topics, and then of course do a little bit of freewheeling here and there. So I grouped it under the 4 things, like the importance of the bow, the material of bow sticks, the specifics of the ARCUS and Muesing ranges. As most of you may know, we make 2 different brands of bows, quite different from another. And then bow hair and rosin, which goes in the direction of more the specifics of the use of the bow, how to get the best use out of your bow, I guess. So let's look at the importance of the bow. I have 6 questions here. Is a good bow more important or a good instrument? You ask a bow maker? Okay. Is a stiff bow better? Yes, it is, and I'll explain why. But only to a certain degree. What makes a bow good? Well, everything. I'll go into that right now. How do I know if a particular bow is a good match for my violin? From playing it? That's easily answered. I mean, go to Doug, go to the shop, play through tons of bows, and you should know, you should see which one really works best. There is no way of 100% sure saying, okay, you've got this and that violin, this will be the bow that suits you perfectly. And I'll talk about that a little later too. It is a little more easy on the double bass and also on the viola, and why I'll explain when we go to the specifics of the range, interestingly. But it's extremely difficult on the violin. So because it's also very subjective which sound you want to hear. So you really have to find the right strings and the right bow to get to your desired sound in the end. So there's not much about knowledge. It's just about try and error. What kind of bow does an older violin require? Same reply, basically. At this point, I may just look into it a little deeper. It's really not the age that makes the sound of a violin, not at all. You can make a new violin that sounds like an old violin, and you can set up an old violin that it sounds pretty much like a new one. It really depends so much on, for example, the bass bar, which is not very well understood by most musicians because you can't see that thing. But every violin maker knows how absolutely important the bass bar is and how much you can actually change the sound of an instrument. But of course, also the bridge and the strings and the neck angle and all this kind of stuff, and the sound post. So that all these compare a lot. So I've once heard a Stradivari that was set up so bright, like a cheap student fiddle. I just couldn't take it. And I also had a modern instrument in my hand over these years that sounded just like one of these very ancient things, a little muffled, a little dull, a little too warm for me. So yeah, it's not about age at all. What should a student, few years playing, look in for a bow? How is the right fit determined? This brings me to a very important question. Again, to the first one, is a good bow important or a good instrument? Worst mistake you can make with a student is let them play with cheap instrument and cheap bow and cheap strings. That's a perfect way of getting rid of them. And I know it can be quite a challenge to talk parents into spending a little more money or significantly more money on a decent instrument and on a good bow. But this is the only way I feel to make students really love playing the violin. I have at some point developed an understanding of how to qualify the qualities of a bow, and I've called that the window and the playing window. It consists from the bowing speed, the pressure, the speed, the downforce, so the power you can apply, the tilting angle, and of course the contact point. So these four parameters, if you have a very good bow, this window is large, is great, and a good instrument. This window is quite wide, and even if you don't bow perfectly, you will get a good sound. On a bad instrument and on a bad bow, this window is tiny, which is one reason why so many students sound so scratchy all the time, because they are outside this window in which you can produce a good sound. So by getting those students or players a better instrument and a better bow, which often or most times is more expensive, this window gets larger and the chances to play a nice sound is significantly improved. By the way, that is also absolutely true, for examples, for soloists who want to produce all kinds of interesting sounds and a variation in sound. And the larger this window is, the more interesting sounds you can actually produce, the more variable your sound is, which is why soloists are so willing to spend a lot of money on an ideal instrument and an ideal bow, not because they love the image, but because it allows them to do more interesting stuff. And of course, the same is true for a player on every level. So it's always worth, in my opinion, to invest in a good bow and in a good instrument. So I think this basically wraps up the question of the importance of the bow. It is of utmost importance. It's been, to me, My bow was, when I was a teenager, the best bow that I could afford and get and lay my hands on was not good enough to make my dream come true to become a professional violinist, which is probably good for you and the rest of the world, because in the end, I turned out to become a bow maker, which I might have ended up being just an orchestra player somewhere, which would certainly have been a beautiful life, and maybe an easier one than I lead now. But yeah, so it is. So I was not happy with the bow, and here we are. So okay, that's so much for the first topic. Now number two, and I think here things are getting a little more miraculous. I would like to show you what the heck is carbon fiber, right? I'll show you this. Let me show you this picture here, all right? I hope everybody sees it. Okay, this is carbon fiber. This is one carbon fiber in a microscopic electro raster. I don't know. So what you see here is these single strands of carbon fiber. They have an amazing complex structure. The carbon fiber is something halfway between a diamond and graphite. Graphite is carbon atoms flat out. In like sheets, like little leaves, if you want, which is why they glide perfectly one over another, and you can use it for greasing stuff and whatnot. And a diamond, as you know, is the hardest material on Earth, and the hardest material theoretically possible. There's nothing that could ever beat carbon in the shape of a diamond. Why is that? Well, it's in nature. It's in the nature of things. This is actually pretty simple science. Carbon is the smallest atom with four atomer bindings. So what carbon can do is it can hold on to four other atoms. And in a diamond, it does just that. It holds tight to four other carbon atoms. And so this is the densest and tightest and most and strongest connection that you can have among atoms. And so if you ever heard something funny about, there's material that exceeds carbon in hardness or strength or whatever, that's bullshit. Forget it. You can't improve upon natural science. It's just ridiculous. Now, carbon fiber, coming back to carbon fiber, is like stretched out graphite or diamond, whatever, somewhere in between. It's got a very complex structure. Let me walk you through this here. Oh yeah, this is also a very nice picture. Gives us a small indication of what we have here. It's a pretty wild lamination of like flat carbon stuff. And this also is a more schematic picture of it. This is again, this is a picture of carbon fibers in a composite. On the left, you see it a little larger, where you see the broken carbon fibers, and you can see this structure like tree rings or whatever. And you can also see in between the epoxy that holds them in place. And on the right, you see the broken carbon fiber again with its many different layers. So it's incredibly complex structure here. And before I go into how it's made, so this is again schematic, what it fundamentally is. So if it would be like a perfect thing, it would be flat. You can see these hexagons that the carbon builds, which is similar like graphite, but then it's all curled up, right? And how do we produce that? We start with polyacrylics, which is, stuff of cheap sweaters, for example, the fibers. They get stretched, then they're stretched further and enlightened, and then they get carbonized in, I believe, something like 1,800 degrees Celsius. So what happens is that everything else, like nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, which is all combined in this plastic fiber, is burned off, and only the carbon remains in place. And so you end up, which is graphitizing and carbonizing. So you get down to almost 100% content of carbon in this fiber. And then you set it again. You have a surface treatment, and then you sizes with epoxy. And then, let me just close this. Okay, I'm back. All right. So, and then we have stuff like this. Let me show you this here. Okay. This is woven carbon fibers that we use to make Muesing bows with. This is the pure fibers. It's got no, it's dry, it's got no epoxy or anything on it. And this here is what we call a pre-preg. So this is actually sticky. It's got the woven fibers and epoxy in it. It's impregnated. And this we use to make the ARCUS bows, this kind of stuff. So, and next, I want to show you some applications of carbon. I need to, here, this, okay. So maybe you are more familiar actually with the use of carbon fiber that you know. Maybe you've been already flying in a plane that's completely made out of carbon fiber, like for example, the Boeing 787. So all you see in blue here is actually carbon fiber, if you believe it or not. So you've been sitting, flying, putting your life at risk in a carbon fiber plane. I'd tell you a little more about the immense qualities of carbon fiber next. So yeah, this is, and the Airbus A350 is the same. So here's black, it's even more logical. So like all you see here, the gray stuff is actually carbon fiber. Yeah, there's other uses of carbon fiber. So in sporting goods industry, if you look at this bicycle, for example, here, that's 90% is carbon fiber. So the wheels, the frame, the fork, the cranks, pretty much everything, the handlebars, everything is made from carbon fiber, which makes these bikes extremely light and durable and fail-proof and gives them great ride quality, which is something, I'll come to that later, which you can design. It's a very simple principle. Wherever you want strength, you put some fibers, and where you want this thing to be flexible, you don't. You put them in the other direction, or you just use more resin or whatever. So you can design the elasticity and the stiffness and the strength as you wish, not as a material comes. So that's a fascinating way of working with fiber composites. This is also pretty interesting. This is the chassis of a modern car. There are very few carbon fiber cars made. This is a BMW i3, which is discontinued, I believe, because the production costs were just too high for that. So it's an electric vehicle. And you see the carbon fiber also used in bows for shooting purposes, not for playing purposes. And, oh no, this is wrong. Here, this is one picture I meant to show you. So in the past, it was quite common for race car drivers to die in crashes. And it's become quite normal for drivers now to survive even the worst crashes, because pretty much all this Formula One car here, the destroyed car here, is made from carbon fiber. And most notably the chassis, so the core body of the race car. And so they can go crashing into a wall with 200 or 300 kilometers per hour, and they still survive that. I mean, in the time when these cars were made from aluminum and steel, they would just been folded up and people would die. So it saved a lot of life. So I already mentioned that carbon fiber is a very special stuff, as these fibers are incredibly strong, and for the time being is the strongest technical material besides pure diamond, but you cannot use pure diamond to make a bow or bicycle. But second place after a pure diamond, the carbon fiber is until today the finest material to build strong and light structures, be it wind turbines, be it planes, be it race cars, or violin bows. And for all I can say now, from an engineering standpoint, we don't have any material inside, because that was another question: what is the future? We don't have any material inside that could outperform carbon fiber. If it comes to the market, everybody will be happy to use it, but even imagining such a material in theory is difficult, because how can you top it? I mean, a stretched out diamond would actually be too brittle. One of the interesting bits about this complex structure of the carbon fiber is that it gives us some elasticity. Let me just go real quickly back to this picture here. This one. Oops. So if you look at the picture on the right side, you see that it is not a straight or simple structure in this carbon fiber, but it's quite chaotic, and this gives it, though it's so extremely strong and stiff, the binding between one carbon atom to the next, this gives it flexibility. This complex structure on a microscopic scale. And it's just what we want. There are actually carbon fibers that are stiffer and harder, and we don't even use them. And they're not used for many applications because they are too brittle and too hard and too stiff. So we don't even use the full potential of carbon because we wanted it to be a little more flexible. So, and now there was also the question about what I think of fiberglass. Fiberglass is similar to aluminum in weight, so it's more heavy. Density is 2.7. Carbon is at 1.8. Just for reference, wood, Pernambuco, is at 1. So carbon fiber is 80% more heavy than wood, but fiberglass is almost 3 times the weight of wood, and it's more flexible. So you cannot build a properly stiff bow from fiberglass. It's actually a lot softer than wood, and that's exactly the opposite from what I was hoping to achieve. So no, fiberglass is no option for me at all. It's dirt cheap, though, that I have to concede, which is why there are these very, very cheap, like, for example, glass bows. but I didn't see any good use in this application. You can make some interesting boats from it, probably. I don't know, but I'm not in, because it's a lot cheaper than carbon fiber, of course. And carbon fiber boats are really expensive. They cost, I don't know how many millions. But yeah, it's a much cheaper material. But in a bow, this little material that we need, I mean, it's very expensive, but we only need like 20, 30 grams of it. So it's really not really a concern. The working hours is much more important. So I think we've covered carbon and carbon fibers.
Bernd, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Just while we're on carbon fiber, can you talk just briefly about resonance and dampening and carbon fiber and why that's so important? Because we've got great understanding now of the strength of carbon and elasticity, but I was wondering if you'd fill in some blanks for us as to why, sound-wise,
absolutely, yes,
carbon makes a difference.
Yes. Okay. All right. Here's a picture for you. Now, if you look at this, you see my hand here on the picture? See that? Okay. Anyways, so you see a blue dot here, blob, wood for wind instruments, and above it you see a lila violet circle, woods for violin bows. And inside of it, you see the light brown one, Pernambuco, and here's a dark blue, snakewood, and then you see CFRP, which is carbon fiber reinforced plastic for violin bows, and which is light gray, and then you see Swarzia. And in this graph, you see two highly important technical aspects. What do you say? I'm missing that word. One is the Young's modulus. This is a modulus of elasticity. It tells us how much resilience a material has. So like the resilience of rubber, for example, is really low, and the resilience of diamond is extremely high, for example. Or steel, for example, is more resilient than lead or copper. And on the on the x-axis here, you have the loss coefficient. The loss coefficient is the damping, which means whenever you knock, for example, on a table or on an instrument or anything else, you will hear it vibrate. You knock on a steel plate and it will resonate for quite a while. You knock on a piece of rubber and it'll be dead in no time. So it's got a lot of damping. So rubber has lots of dampening and very little resiliency. Young's modulus, very low. So it's the worst material you can use for a bow. So that's why there's no rubber bows. Okay. Now, on the opposite side, you can see in the very left upper corner, you can see CFRP, very lonely place there, up there. That's where we are with the ARCUS bows. Really stiff stuff, yes. And very little damping. And in the string instruments, that's exactly what you want because we have too much damping anyways. So only about 10 to maybe 15% of the energy you put in the instrument comes out as sound. That's very different in a flute or in a trumpet, for example, where 90% of your energy is transformed into sound. But on a string instrument, it's only very, very little. And every percent more that you have in, damping turns energy into heat. So actually 90% or 85% of what we produce when you play a violin or cello is warmth and not sound. And that part we want to reduce to bring out a nicer and bigger sound. And we can do that with carbon fiber. If you look at that picture again here is this light gray area, CFRP for violin bows. That's where we are when we have a lot of epoxy in the stick. Oh, you know what? I'll show you. I show you something. This here is a cut up cheap Chinese bow stick. And in the front part here, you see, here, for example, these light areas, that is pure epoxy. So it's pockets of epoxy. And the dark stuff is basically the carbon fibers. So there's lots of epoxy in here that does a lot of damping. You can also see that the structure of the carbon fiber is absolutely chaotic, which again produces a lot of damping, because you must imagine that the waves, the sound waves, are traveling up and down the stick just like they do on a string. Oh, I can show you that video in a minute. And this is, and you also see pockets of resin here, up here, and up here. And this epoxy is a perfect damper. So that's exactly not what we want. Now let's look at, for example, a cut open ARCUS stick. So what you see here is none of all that. So it's the pure carbon fibers. If you look from the outside, it's ground, and from the inside, it's a little shiny. So this is how an ARCUS bow looks from the inside. There's no pockets of resin or anything stupid like that. Actually, that's one of the bits that makes it really hard to produce. I mean, making a bow look good from the outside is pretty easy. Make it look good from the inside, a hollow carbon fiber bow, that's a tricky bit. I can also show you, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. That's a CODA bow. A diamond SX, I believe. You can see in here, I mean, there's this yellow stuff, which was also a lot of extra resin, but there's also a long pocket of epoxy underneath the carbon structure here. It's light gray in this case, it's not white. So there's a lot of stuff inside this stick. So you can see how difficult it is to make a carbon fiber bow, and they've applied some tricks which are not necessarily helpful for the resonance. Also very interesting. This is a glass or braided bow, which I cut up. It's got some foam inside, which I was completely blown away when I cut this baby up. I was going like, what the hell? This is exactly what you don't want to do. You put in a foam inside a bow stick. Hell, how desperate must you be to come up with this as a solution? Goodness gracious. So no, we don't want to do that. This, by the way, is how a Muesing bow looks from the inside. So it's different. It's all these woven stuff, but it's also, perfectly clean. There's nothing extra damping stuff. We don't want that. All right. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks, Bernd. That was very, very helpful.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So, okay. I think this pretty much wraps up the questions about the material. Let me just finish this off with, when I started developing the bows, I didn't know much about carbon fiber, and I had no idea about how difficult life would get to make a perfect carbon fiber bow. It took us years to only make a working prototype, and we got shoved away by all these aerospace guys who presented my developments and drawings, and they said, no, you can't do that. It's perfectly impossible. Look at this again. I mean, we get a wall thickness here. I don't know. Let me get some extra light here for you. Maybe this works. So you can see how thin this baby actually is. It's 0.7 millimeter wall thickness. So that's pretty much nothing. And it has to be perfectly even from here all the way down to the end. So it's got to be the same everywhere. And making such a thin thing, and then give it a curve, and reduce the diameter, and then the tip must be one piece. Oh, turn the light back on again. So it really must be one piece. Let me see if I can show that to you. Yes. So you can see it's a cut up head here with the Maltese, and it's actually one piece with a hollow stick. So you have a solid head and a hollow stick. And how the hell are you gonna get this together when you work with carbon fiber? It's no fun, I tell you. But it's possible. We figured it out. We were lucky. We found some very weird solution at some point, but it works. Okay, so that is that. And for what I want to do, and here we come to the specifics of the ARCUS and Muesing range. The carbon fiber does exactly what we want, and I don't even, as I explained, I don't even use high modulus fibers, or in some bows I actually put in a little bit of fiberglass or some lead balls in the heads, because the material is already too light or too stiff. So we could be like here. We could make violin bows. We did it. We made violin bows with like 40 grams weight. Or I can make a violin bow with a stiffness of a double bass bow. We can do that with carbon fiber. And I don't want to do that. What we want to do is to make the perfect tool. We don't want to break any technical records or whatever. We want to make a perfect bow. And yes, the carbon fiber allows me to do exactly what I want with leeway. So we can actually dial in exactly to where we want to be. And while with, for example, Pernambuco or any other materials like all metals, we're limited to what the material actually can. We cannot reach what we want. Before I started developing the carbon fiber bow, I was actually hoping to make maybe titanium bows. That would have been a little easier. But titanium is already too heavy, and so is aluminum, believe it or not. You cannot get past Pernambuco with metal bows. Vium tried in the 19th century, and he failed. I mean, Paganini played his bows, but the rest of the world did not so much. And yeah, one reason was because the bows were simply too heavy and tip heavy also. So you see some pictures where Paganini plays with a pretty old style bow hold. So he holds the bow more like this, which by this time wasn't the fashion actually. And that was because these Vium metal bows were actually quite tip heavy, and to compensate for that, he played it like this. The other problem is that metal.
Yes. Sorry, just to I'm conscious of time, and just to work through some of the other questions. Firstly, I'm wondering. So you touched on this. Can you explain in your mind what the perfect weight of a bow is, and why your bows are so much lighter than traditional wooden bows?
Yeah, and that's a very simple answer. As I explained, we can make any weight, and we made a wide variety of bows and showed it to players. And of course, I also tried them, but we just showed them to players, and they ended up liking this kind of weight best. And for example, the best-selling bow that we have nowadays is the T-series violin bows. They weigh about 51 grams. And compared to a wooden bow, the stick is much, much lighter, but the head is more heavy and the heel is more heavy. So we basically got about the same in-flight stability as a 60-gram bow, but it's still lighter. So if you accelerate the bow like this, you feel it's lighter. But if you do bouncing bows like spiccato, ricochet, whatever, you have the extra weight in the head, which gives you just the right impact that you need to trigger the string. And for viola, we found that most players like a weight of about 60 grams, which you know as a violin bow, but that's what they like. So we make it. And with cello, it's about 70, which is traditionally a viola bow when you make it from wood. But players prefer cello bows with 70 grams. So who am I to judge? So I just make what you want. That's all.
Well, it's a very interesting subject for a lot of players. Like a lot of players certainly come into our store and say, like, I have to have a bow that's exactly this weight, like down to the gram. But and that's what we've been used to, I think, growing up playing wooden bows. But am I right? Historically, like baroque bows, when we were using gut strings, were historically quite light for chamber music, and then like 40 grams or something like that for 40 something grams for a violin bow. But the repertoire obviously started to change throughout the classical and into the romantic period. So I'm guessing that we started using or bow makers started making heavier bows because we needed more sound out of gut strings. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that is basically correct. Of course, we needed not heavier bows. Actually, the lighter something is, the easier it vibrates. So in theory, a lighter bow is a louder bow. But you need more resilience. So that's why bow makers at that time started to make stronger bows. They just left more wood on the bow to give it more stiffness, more resilience. And so you could play louder. And you could, so the Tourte and Picard and Simon, whatever bows, they were designed to get everything out of the gut strings. Now, what happened in the early 20th century, that steel strings and all kinds of windings and stuff appeared and became popular. But as I already explained, metal didn't help, and you could not simply make a stronger wooden bow without making it too heavy. So every wood bow maker has a problem that you have to choose between several evils. Like, for example, if you have, I have two bows here, two wooden bows. One, as you can already tell from the color, the darker one is actually a much denser, more heavy wood, which provides a more beautiful sound. The lighter one, a lighter color, is also a lighter Pernambuco wood, and you can leave more wood on it, so it gives a better resiliency. And that's what many professional players have. They have a stronger bow and a more beautiful sounding bow, but you can never combine it. It's just, with this material, it's not possible. So that's why bows became more heavy, because they needed to play louder, because simply the concert halls were growing and growing. Back in the year 1800, concert halls were really small affairs with maybe 100 people. That was normal. And by the end of the 19th century, there were concert halls with 2,000 people in it. And you would still have to sing that damn old fiddle and make a noise, and reach the upper ranks. And so you needed a much stronger bow, and that's also why you needed steel strings and wound strings and all that. You just couldn't cut through with a pure gut string. And that's why bows became heavier and heavier over time. But not because heavy is good, but the strength was needed. So more wood on it, heavier bow.
I guess just as a follow-up, because this question's come up a few times, if we've got baroque players,
right,
looking to get a bow, is your suggestion still to use a carbon fiber bow for pure gut strings? Is that still the best? No. Okay, so in your view, using a snake wood or something like that was more typical at that time might be.
You can perfectly well play on gut strings with an ARCUS bow, for example. It works. I've seen it done. I've try it myself. But does it make sense? I mean, why would you play on pure gut strings? Because you want to play like they did in the year 1800 or whenever. And why would you then not use a similar bow or a matching bow? So
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
Logic is not there.
Yep, of course. That's great. We might just quickly move to some of the more general questions, which I think we can deal with fairly quickly, and then we'll go on to some more specifics about your bows. So one concerns horsehair and the quality of horsehair, how important that is to the overall sound production. And I guess this is a leading question because I've already discussed this with you before, about synthetic hair. And why you wouldn't use that, because I guess like instinctively we might think, well, Bernd Müsing is a carbon guy, so using modern materials, so naturally you'd want to go for a modern material for their hair, but that's not necessarily so. So can you talk to that?
Again, yeah. So bow hair is of course very important. I mean, it's as important as, let's say, the strings or the bow stick or the instrument. I mean, with bad bow hair, you're lost. You get a lot of damping, you get a lot of noise, and then they tear, and you're cooked in the middle of the concert or what. So, good bow hair is terribly expensive nowadays, but it's still absolutely needed. And there's no plastic replacement for some very simple reasons. Well, we're back at let's go back at some numbers. So the density of wood, of bow hair is very similar to wood, actually, to heavy wood like 0.8, 0.9. But plastic like polyamide, for example, is twice the weight, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. So it's almost twice the weight. So at the same given volume, all right, but it gets worse because it is a lot more flexible than hair. So you would actually need like about 4 times the weight of the hair to make a strand of plastic fiber that has the same elasticity. So 4 times. Now imagine you put more hair than on a double bass bow on your violin bow. Apart from you can get it into, but okay. And then here comes a huge problem, that's damping. Plastic has a lot of damping. So we try to put some plastic hair on our bows, and what it does, it brings the quality of the bow down like 2 steps or 3 steps. So you, for example, you buy a T8 and then you put plastic hair on it, and the sound degrades to like a T5 maybe. So it's really a terrible solution. And last but not least, it doesn't hold the rosin. You may roughen it up or do some chemical tricks or whatever, so the rosin hair holds okay, but that's wearing off. And after some time, you experience that the resin sticks better to the string than to the hair or to the fibers. So you play off you put the rosin on the bow and you play it off on the string, and you have a bulk of rosin on the string all the time. So I ended up with that. I tried all kinds of plastic fibers. In the middle of an orchestra rehearsal, I just had to stop, using that bow because it just didn't work. After half an hour, all the rosin was gone from the bow, and it was all on the strings. So no,
it's fascinating. I guess I'm curious as well that about rosin, because that came up in a lot of the questions as well.
All right.
So some of us might have grown up and heard from their teacher or from a maker sometime this idea that we use horsehair because the hair has little fibers all over it, and that's what the rosin sticks to. And I know that you've got some interesting slides about that, and I'm curious in the chat if anybody had heard that growing up or playing throughout the years. But you've actually shared with me in the past some close-ups of what a horsehair actually looks like, and what it looks like when it's coated in rosin, and why it works the way it does.
Coming. All right. here we are. So this is, yeah. So you see here on the left side, a horsehair. So there's no hooks. Of course, there's no hooks. I mean, why should there be hooks on a hair? How stupid is that idea? I don't know whoever came up with that crap. So it's perfectly flat, plain. I mean, you can just, try your hairs. There's no hooks on them. And if there were, there were some real big hooks that could hook on and string, the sound of the violin would be like, brrr, right? Instead of a continuous sound. And on the right side, you see the hair covered up in rosin and colophony. So it's completely covered. So that's how the hair survives the contact with the string, is because it's protected by a layer of rosin. And it's also, of course, the stuff that starts the stick-slip effect. So it's a glue. Try playing with a bow without rosin. So it's actually a glue thing. So
you mentioned the slipstick effect,
right.
And some of our viewers might not have come across that before. And certainly the first time I saw it, I was like, it was blowing my mind. I'd never really thought about what's actually going on with the bow and how it connects with the string.
Let me go here.
Yeah.
I've made an entire video about how the bow and the string actually work together. And I recommend you go, maybe some people want to go to our YouTube channel and have a look.
We can put a link in the chat as well. So if you're interested, we'll put that in the chat.
Excellent. So what you can see here is that the bow is moving and the string is moving, and it makes a kink that runs up and down the string. So it's really actually like a wave in the ocean. And the same kinds of waves go up and down the stick, and also travel over the instrument, whatever. So this is a typical way. It's not that the string is going from one side to the other. That's not the way stuff vibrates. It's actually, like the waves you see on the ocean. That's the way how vibrations go. Yeah. And what it does here, it sticks most of the time, and then here real quick, it slips. Slip, slip, slip. You can see it, everybody? Okay,
that's fascinating.
Good.
So
right.
I guess you need, going back to the rosin, you need enough rosin to, because one of the questions that came up quite a bit was how much rosin do you use? And I think we get asked that question just at every level, like whether somebody's just gotten started or they've been playing for 30 years, like
as little as possible. Yeah, as little as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, every hair must be covered in rosin, but lightly. It's like when you glue stuff. The thinner the glue is, the stronger the bond. And the same is true with rosin. So you want a very close contact between the hair and the string. And the less rosin you have, the better the contact is. All right. So you want to reuse as little rosin as possible, and a high quality rosin, of course. You have this wonderful new manufacturer here in Australia, Leatherwood, fantastic stuff. And I'll discuss that topic with him also when we met at Mondo Musica, and he was of the same opinion. I mean, as a rosin maker, he should be pleased if people use plenty of his stuff, right? To wear through such a cake as fast as possible. But he knows perfectly well that you should use a high quality rosin as sparingly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might have seen Andrew Baker in the list of participants earlier as well. So he was
good.
I think unless there's another Andrew Baker who's interested in bows.
Right.
So yeah.
Next thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Next thing, I would like to go over the specifics of the ARCUS and the Muesing range, and also what differentiates them. What's the difference between the two? And I would like to start with a very obvious difference in how they look. A little more light here. And yeah, you can see that the Muesing bow has this typical carbon weave stick, which is this one. And the ARCUS has this shiny gray structure, a little glossy, if you look down here. Okay, so yeah, you got a little bit of light on it. It's getting quite interesting. And here's the music stick. So what's the difference? The difference is that we started with the ARCUS bows. The idea was to make the perfect bow, which means we're making something like, if you want, race cars or high quality watches, whatever. But the bow with a capability to get the biggest possible sound out of your string and instrument, and to allow you to do from your playing technique everything you can imagine, and which goes beyond the limitations of wooden bows. So that's the concept of the ARCUS bows. And we're making them now for 23 years, and I don't know, 10,000 or so professional players use them. That was another question. But yeah, what percentage of players that is in the whole world, I really don't know. But yeah, we sold a lot of bows over the years. And most of these players use them as their primary bows. While we started much later with the Muesing bows, actually, I started to develop this idea after 2007, when we all learned that Pernambuco is at some point coming to an end for its natural use in bows. So it was clear we will have to crank up production significantly and also provide people with a more affordable solution, because making these ARCUS bows is very labor intense and very expensive, and we just cannot make them more economically. It's not feasible, not with this technology that we do here. But the idea was to create another line of bows that's more affordable, but it's also a different philosophy behind it. I meant to design bows that are the most easy playing, the most natural playing. And though it has to be powerful, it wouldn't have to be a soloist bow. So if it only develops the sound of a good wooden bow, that should satisfy us perfectly fine. So we wouldn't have to go beyond that. So I was striving to make a bow that sounds as good as a good wood bow, but it's stronger and it's available. I mean, you can make it from olive oil, the carbon fiber, if you want. So you can make. It's not done today. It's still made from petrol, but I mean, as long as we burn it in our cars, we can. Well, this is a better use for crude oil, I believe. Anyways, so we needed bows for students, for amateurs, that are more affordable and still very good to play and more natural to play. We make it in a very different way. So the manufacturing time, the working hours that go in a Muesing bow is about half that of an ARCUS bow. So they can be quite a lot cheaper. So I can tell you in euros, roughly, we go from 500 to 1,500 with the Muesing bows, and from roughly 1,000 to 9,000 euros on the ARCUS bows. So just to give you a rough idea. I think it's a little more in Australian dollars, right? I don't know what's the exchange rate. 0.8 or what?
Changes all the time.
Okay.
I only know it the other way around. Oh, yeah. I don't think so. No, I mean, can you hear me, Bernd?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's about 0.64 or something the other way around at the moment.
Right.
And there's we have GST here as well.
Okay.
But sorry, just one other point about the two different lines.
Yeah.
Is it strategic thing that you've changed the weight on the Muesing bows? Is it just is that just the result of the manufacturing process? They're a little bit heavier than an ARCUS bow, correct?
Okay. Here's a trick. Okay, I'm giving away a big secret now. All right, everybody, don't you listen. So the tuning of the bow, if we look only at violin bows, is extremely important for the sound that it draws. So the tuning of a wooden bow is pretty much exactly at 50 hertz. Now, with the ARCUS bows, we go up 1 octave to 100 hertz. So that's the basic resonance of the ARCUS bows, 1 octave up. And acoustically, for the psychoacoustics, it's the same sound. So 1 octave up or down, for us, it's the same sound, basically. It's a little brighter, darker, whatever, but it's the same sound. If we change the tuning of the stick, half a note up or down, it makes the sound go bright or dark. But an octave does nothing. Now, that's also getting me to why we make the different sticks, the different bows for ARCUS. So we can make brighter and darker sounding bows. For example, for the violin, that's very important. Like you choose brighter or darker sounding strings, similar concepts at play there. But when I was thinking about what do we do with the Muesing bows? With this kind of technology, with this woven stick, I cannot make the stick as stiff. So we cannot target this 100 hertz for a fundamental resonance. So that was out of the question. That it was impossible. But I would not want to go to the elasticity of a wood bow and to the weight of a wood bow. I still wanted it to be lighter and stiffer. And I had the very funny idea of trying the fifth. And my idea was, if I can go to the fifth, maybe we have a similar effect that the sound is basically the same, although it's half an octave up. So that was a very dangerous idea because we had to invest a lot of money to build the molds and to develop the bow under that assumption. So I was hoping for the best. I thought, okay, we'll go for like increasing the stiffness of the bow by half and reducing the weight by 5-6 grams or whatever. And I calculate, okay, that should end up with like 75 hertz for a fundamental resonance. That hopefully might work. Luckily, it did. So when we consider the weight and the stiffness of the bow, it's not only about playability in a bow, it's always also about the sound. And you cannot separate the two subjects in a bow. It's always combined, like in a string, which makes the topic really a bit difficult because you change one and you change the other. And you have to understand the whole picture. And in this case, as I said, we knew we had to make it a little heavier and a little softer than the ARCUS bows, but stiffer and lighter than the wooden bows, and we would try to fit a new point there where the sound would be just right. So that's how we ended up with that weight and elasticity.
That's great. Thanks so much for the explanation.
And yes, one more thing. One more thing. Of course, what we have in these sticks is we have a higher percentage of epoxy. So in the ARCUS bows, we have this extremely low damping because we have come down to like 25% epoxy, 75% is carbon fibers, which is ridiculous. Nobody does that. We do. And so to reduce the damping to an absolute bare minimum, in the Muesing bows, we cannot go as low. With this structure of the carbon fiber, we need more epoxy to fill the voids. So we end up with an epoxy content of about 40%, which is still a lot better than the usual carbon fiber bows, which have an epoxy content of about 60% and only 40% is fiber. So there's actually more damping than in wooden bows. but with the Muesing bows, we still have less or equal damping to the finest Pernambuco. Right?
Makes a lot of sense. So I'm just conscious of everyone's time because we've gone a little bit over. So we'll just, can you just talk a little bit about the range, specifically? I guess a lot of players might wonder why you've got the numbering system with your bows, because in my mind, before I started researching carbon fiber and talking with you, I just thought, well, you make one carbon fiber bow, you make another, and they're all the same. So maybe some of our participants in the webinar might be thinking, okay, if you want to make a T8 or a 9, which is your highest grade, that you just make that. And if you want to make a cheap one, you just make a cheap one. So yeah, can you explain
yes,
why there's that difference? Yeah.
If you look at, is it clear image? Let me
it's fairly clear. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you look at this cut up ARCUS stick, you see it's not perfectly round inside. You see that?
Okay. There's like little bits that like straight edges and funny.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's thinner and thicker parts, which is of course not good. If you look at this one here, you see it's much more even. You see the wall thickness is pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
Right? See it? Okay. So what happens is we cannot completely control what's going on the inside of the stick. We try to, but it's, as I explained earlier, that's a real tricky bit. And so inside you have changes in the wall thickness and also a play in the arrangement of fibers, even on the outside. Wait, let me put a little light on here and see if I can. It's difficult to show. If you take a very close look at an ARCUS bow, all right, under a good light, it's not possible to show it through the camera. Then you will discover that the fibers are not perfectly straight, and we can't, because when it's all in the mold and the epoxy is heating up, it all starts to float around a little bit. And what we strive, of course, with every stick that we make, we strive for perfection, and we hardly ever succeed. So basically, all ARCUS bows that are not an S9 or T9 are a failure. Still, I mean, they're still fine bows, but they're not perfect. And it's like, you can ask any violin maker. They're always searching for the perfect piece of spruce, for example. And it's near impossible to find. There's always some issues when you have fibrous materials. Fibers always do stuff that you wouldn't ask them to do. Now, that we are able to make sticks like the T9 or S9, that's really quite fascinating in itself. I never expected that we would be able to control the fibers so well. Now, what we do is when we make the sticks, we make them in batches like 10, 12, sometimes 15 of the same type. And then we check the resonance, basically the damping. And the lesser damping, the better, more beautiful the sound. And also with the lesser damping, this window that I explained earlier grows and grows and grows. So the window of an T4 is, let's say, similar to what you're used to in a wooden bow. But when you come to a T9, it's enormous. It's almost impossible to find those borders, because earlier than the bow, everything else gives. So the instrument, the strings, they would all, not allow going further, where the bow would still open up new ways. So that's why I'm saying that the 9 class ARCUS bows are pretty much they have endless capabilities, and which is why so many soloists or concertmasters just love them, because they allow you to do everything. While a T4 would not. It still, you still feel the limits of what a bow can supply, and it's pretty linear. So the steps that we look for when we classify the sticks are pretty evenly spaced out. Well, when you're at the center of our line, our best-selling bow, for example, is a T6. It retails at 2,300 euros. What is that? 3,000 Australian dollars, something like that.
A bit more, I think, but
a little bit more. Yeah, three and a half. That's where you are when you make a blind test, a comparison in a big hall, and you've got a tour de Picard, whatever, and you put a T6 to the same blind test. It might still come out the winner, but it would, of course, it definitely be on par with those high quality wooden bows.
And so sorry to interrupt. So when you're grading the bows, surely you must have a very scientific electronic way of grading them, and that's, you just put it through into a machine. It says, yes, it's a T5 or a T6. Is that how it works?
Yeah, we have a very, very sophisticated and highly complicated machine and a supercomputer that does that. That's it.
Yeah, actually, this is what I found fascinating. So it's really all like, there's no way to do this. I mean, we put a lot of science into what you do, but at the end of the day, you and your team are literally tapping sticks.
Yes.
And listening for the response.
It's like It's like you put a robot on the stage and ask him to play a Tchaikovsky violin concerto. Yeah, good luck with that. No, there's still a lot of things as humans can do that machines and robots cannot. Like, for example, laminating an ARCUS stick. No machine can do that. Or tapping or classifying sticks. We tried. Actually, we tried hard. We had a development process running to objectivize the classification of the sticks. We just couldn't do it.
Have you got a stick
in the
there?
end, we produced, in the end, this machine produced sound files that we were then judging.
Yeah.
It was complete rubbish.
Yeah, at the end of the day, music's such a a human experience, isn't it? So humans have to make that decision. Have you got a stick there that you can show us what you do to test that? Because you grade them before you even play them, correct?
I can actually, yes, I can. I can do this with this bow here. You know what? I'll try this in front of my microphone, and you try to listen. Maybe you hear it. Can you hear anything?
Yeah, we can.
You do?
Okay. When we were trying this to do this before, we noticed that we can't hear the whole sound ring out because Zoom tends to cut off the low frequencies. Yeah. But it's really fascinating for me. You can really hear when you tap that, and you're tapping it on your hand and next to your ear, I guess, normally, and you're listening to the response. And based on that, you and your panel just are making a determination. And I guess you back that up by then, creating that cross-section, occasionally slicing them up to confirm that that's that
right.
Yeah.
But let me just quickly explain how we came to this tapping test, and that was quite fascinating, because when we started making the sticks, we were quite surprised how much the sound quality varied from one bow to another. We never expected that. And it was huge. It wasn't a small difference. It was huge. And so we really didn't know how to handle that in the beginning, because we made the bows and then one sounded beautiful and the other terrible or not at all. And then, of course, we did this cut up thing and tried to understand what's going on there. And we found the differences, but that didn't solve the problem, because we had bows that everybody wanted and other bows that nobody wanted. So there was a little bit of an economical problem there also. And so we found, okay, we need to classify these sticks, and we tried various ways. And that was also when we tried to build a machine to test the damping and everything. But then we came to this very simple tapping, which is, by the way, something every violin maker does. You know, when they're chopping wood,
Absolutely.
they just,
yes, when we're making a violin, that's what we do. We get the wood and we tap it.
You can see them, you know, doing this thing here. You know?
Yep. I mean, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's a very, very simple test. I mean, you can do that with a wine glass or whatever, or with your hollow head. And yeah, it's the same works too. Interestingly, it is not easy on a bow stick to really grade it down, and only a few people in my workshop can do it. And I always do the final testing, often do a lot of testing, but we do it with two, more often with three people alternating, and then we discuss certain sticks of which we are not perfectly sure where to put them. And so it is quite a complex process. But in the end, when you get a bunch of bows in front of you, I do that every now and then. I do a blind test. I just put some, let's say, T4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the test, on the table, close my eyes, shuffle them around and play them and sort them in the way I like them. And many other players have done the same. And you, depending on the instrument, sometimes, you know, a T7 or a T6 is better than a T7. It happens from one class to another with a given instrument or with a certain string. But I've never experienced it like crossing like two classes. A T8 is always nicer playing and sounding than a T6, always. And then you change the instrument, and you may have some other variables there, because you still have to match a string to a bow. That brings me to this very, very important topic of, I addressed the tuning on the violin bows. It is a bit similar on the cello, because also the timbre of the cello is quite delicate. And when you have a big, dark sounding cello, you're best off most of the times with an S series ARCUS bow, because that adds some brilliance. If you have a small cut cello with a brighter sound, you better use an M series ARCUS bow, because that's tuned a full tone lower. So it makes the sound much warmer and deeper and rounder. For medium built cellos, for example, you're fine with a T. But with viola and double bass, the story is totally different. Let's start with the double bass. Nobody gives a thought if double bass sounds a little brighter or darker. It's of no concern to anybody. So we don't need to tune our bows, not a lot. So we need to be in the right ballpark, that's it. On a double bass, response is everything. So we do everything to improve the response of the bows. And that also opens up the sound. So instead of making a lot of noise, an ARCUS bow actually renders the sound of a double bass much more melodic. So you actually can hear a double bass playing a melody, not only a rhythm, but a melody. And I fitted out some complete orchestras with bows. And his most surprising thing was that you could all of a sudden hear melodies coming from the double bass section, which you've never heard before. You know, when they all play with the ARCUS bow, you hear the melody in the double bass, and crisp and clear. And okay, that's double bass. And for viola, there's another topic. Okay, violas have a problem. A very specific one is that they're too big. A proper viola is always too big, so it's impossible to handle. So all violas are basically a smaller version of what it theoretically should be. Even me with my big hands and long arms, even I struggle to play a 43 centimeter viola. It's hard. I mean, if I do a long quartet rehearsal for 5 hours, I'm worn out. So I play a 52 instead, 52.5. So that's the maximum I can play. And it has a relatively long string of like 38 centimeter. But if you don't have these tall hands, or if you don't want to enjoy all that pain, and you play a smaller instrument, also the string length is smaller. So it's a shorter string. But the tuning is always the same, which means that the shorter string with the same tuning has a much lower tension than the larger string. Same tuning. So this means, and I understood this only a couple of years ago, really, that for a large viola, we need a stronger bow to match the higher tension of the longer string. And for a smaller viola, we need a softer stick with less hair on, by the way. And so for viola, we actually do the M bows for the smaller violas, the T for the medium, and the P for the large violas. So it's a completely different game from all the other instruments. And again, that's a little similar to the double bass. If a viola sounds a little brighter or darker, it really is not so much of a problem. I mean, you can still fool around with strings a little bit, but it's sometimes a viola sounds a little more like a dark violin. Sometimes it almost sounds like a cello. That's all acceptable. It's not like on the violin, where on the violin, which is when it is a little too bright, it's already shrill, and it's a little too dark, and it's all already muffled or boring and far away sounding. So on a violin, it's very critical. On a cello, it is still important. On viola and double bass, much less concerned. So there you look mostly at the playability. And on the violin and cello, you'll have to look a lot at the sound, at the color it produces.
Thanks so much, Bernd. That's, yeah. I mean, it explains so much, particularly for violas. I find it fascinating because what you're saying is, by definition, if you've got a bow, even if it's a wooden bow that you really like on your short viola, it's probably not going to be working on your big one. Like that, you know what I mean? Like if it's working well on one, it might not be working well on the other. And that's to do with string length and the complications around that. Like that, yeah.
Here's a funny little thing. Actually, what I've found when I did all my research is that a traditional viola bow is what you need to play a violin. And that's with modern strings. That's pretty much a good match. And there's actually some players that do that. They're like the concertmaster of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. I forgot his name. He was, for most of his career, he was playing a viola bow on his violin, because that would be a match. Actually, viola bows are even too small for a small viola. They're good for violins.
Yeah. Well, straight away we had a question come through from Kirsten saying, "What would you classify as small?" I guess the small viola is. So we think in inches here for some weird reason in Australia, because everything else is in centimeters. But for violas, it'd be 15 to 15 and a half might be small. Then 16
the body size,
40 centimeters. Yeah.
The body size does not matter at all. It's the string length.
String length. Okay,
yes.
Sure.
You sometimes have smaller violas with a larger neck, with longer neck, and a further downward position of the bridge. So you end up with a small viola, but with a longer or medium-sized string. And while on the other hand, you have sometimes that big body violas where the bridge is like in the center of the instrument almost, and a pretty short neck. So you don't even need such a stiff bow because the string is not very long. So what you really have to do is you have to measure the open string. And we designed the T viola bows, which is the medium one, for 37 centimeter string length, and the P for 38 and the M for 36. So that's what you have to check.
Sure.
And well, I know it only in centimeters. Sorry, guys, but I'm sure you can calculate that.
I have no idea why we think in inches for violas in this country. It's bizarre, but that's the way it is. Hey, look, Bernd, we've gone well over time, and we're so appreciative of your time. We didn't quite get to all of the questions that got asked, but we will do.
Yes, we are.
We'll
pretty much covered.
We've
Yeah,
covered most of them. Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If there are a few that came through that we didn't get to, my team will get in touch with them directly and just reach out to see if we can help with any of those issues that they might be having. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we certainly learned a lot.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you very much for hosting me. Thank you very much for attending today, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from any one of you.
So if people have any further questions about ARCUS or Muesing, so firstly, your website is arcus-muesing.com.
Right. .de.
Oh, sorry.
.de for Deutschland.
Yeah, for Deutschland. So if they have maybe some specific things that they feel more comfortable asking you about, or they can go there, or there's a lot of information there. Actually, it's very good resource.
Yeah, but I really would like to recommend also our YouTube channel. I address a lot of different topics. And if you have some time to kill on a rainy Sunday, whatever,
we've got lots of those.
You're heartily invited to move on with those. And if you have any particular question that dives deeper into the physics or whatever, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be happy to discuss both. As you've already noticed, I'm happy to discuss both day and night.
I guess the other thing to note is that here at Sydney String Centre, we've got an amazing range of ARCUS and Muesing bows. So if anybody is listening in and they want to come and try them, there's nothing. I mean, we can talk about bows all day, but I think there's nothing quite coming into a shop, any good shop, with your instrument and picking up bows and trying them. And to the first question that got asked, which is like, how do I know if it's a good bow? Like, when you know, I guess, don't you? Like you have to actually try them.
Oh, yes. And I have one important thing to say. No, they do not play like wooden bows. So you probably already guessed that from me explaining how different they are, but it does require some learning, some adjusting, some understanding. You absolutely need time, and you need to be ready to change your playing and your listening. Otherwise, it makes no sense. If you just want a bow that is just like your wooden bow, stay with it. You don't need to look at an ARCUS or Muesing bow.
Yeah,
we're trying to expand the possibilities of the violin and every other string instrument.
I guess one of the other things that you didn't talk about, which and I won't spend too much time, I promise, for everyone's listening, but having spent some time playing your bows now, and I'm a cellist, just like my right hand and arm, it's completely relaxed when I'm using them. But it was a bit unsettling at first, like that I could actually use a lot less effort with the arm and the whole way it's connecting with the bow, the way it's vibrating. That if you're really used to one thing for a time, it's like changing shoes or something like that. They might not be the most comfortable, but if it's what you're used to, then you kind of stick with it. Trying something new, it's a little bit unsettling, but I can attest to the fact that it's been a very interesting experience, and I feel a lot more relaxed in my right arm now. And that's not I mean, that's part of the intention, isn't it? I guess with your bows, like you were trying to deal with the fact
absolutely,
that musicians, like when you're playing, like for serious players, if you're spending several hours in a day doing this task, there's a lot of musicians out there with injuries. It's a real serious thing that you're trying to address.
Well, actually, we run into that by sheer accident. I had no idea how many players have issues in their bow arm and hand and shoulder. I actually had problems with my shoulder when I played really excessive, like whole weekends or whatever. Even when I was a teenager, my right shoulder started to hurt at some point, and And then, decades later, when I started with my own bows, I discovered, oh, wait a minute, I can play no end now. Do I want to practice that long? But it never hurt again. And I got reports like that from professional players who had serious issues with their wrists, with their thumbs, whatever. And they reported back to me like with playing with an ARCUS bow, it went away. I've also made a video addressing that, explaining that, but it's basically, again, the fundamental resonance. So 50 hertz can be a real serious problem, and 100 hertz is out of that dangerous zone. So the load on your bones and joints is significantly or totally removed. And that really helps a lot for many players. Yeah,
it makes so much sense. And I guess my experience playing them was, if you're, because in a shop like this, I have to play a lot of bows, lots of different bows all the time, people coming in. If you're not used to an ARCUS bow, it's actually very challenging to get the sense of how they work by spending 10 minutes playing it and then going back and then trying a wooden bow that you might be used to, and then going back and forward and back and forward. Found that quite challenging and not very helpful. So taking your advice, which is in your compendium, I think, which is just to stick with it for a period of time, hours or ideally day, a few days, and you really do adjust, and then it makes sense. So if anyone is coming in to try them, and I guess that's the other thing to say, we've got a great range here, but ARCUS and Muesing well represented around the country now. And that you certainly have representation in Brisbane and Melbourne and in Perth and I don't know, probably in Tasmania. I think we're working on that. So because there were people from all over Australia at the very beginning we saw. So if you need to, you can reach out through us. We can point you in the right direction for your local dealer. And if you're living regionally, which is a big thing in Australia as well, because there's a lot of us that are not near one of the big capital cities, we have ways of getting the bows to you to try as well. And the great thing, what I love about your bows, Bernd, is that I can ship them and I don't have to worry about them breaking. They're virtually indestructible. So quite happily, we've sent them all over the country and arrive safely every single time. So something else to, great advantage.
Yes, while we're at that, may I point out two nice little features that we've developed over time is like this pure carbon surface. You can play Colenio as for hours if you like. I mean, you will ruin your strings, but the carbon stick is actually harder than any string material, so you will never damage your stick. It also never slides, so you just cannot, this is so grippy, this stuff, it just won't slide. Even if you've got completely wet fingers, nothing happens. So it just never slides. It comes with a 30-year warranty on the stick. Ask that of anyone.
Yeah, I mean, that is phenomenal as well. When there's not a bow maker alive that's going to give you a 30-year guarantee on the stick.
Well, actually, the 30-year warranty, it's only a 30-year warranty because that's the maximum allowed in the EU.
Okay.
So I would really provide the bows with a 300-year warranty because they are really virtually indestructible and they're made forever. Like diamonds are made forever.
You'll be around in 300 years, Ben?
Sure. Yeah. You got that? I certainly hope the company is still around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I also wanted to show you one little thing here. You can see here is a little bit of a bushing, and also, damn it, inside here. I don't know. Sure. If you can see it. So this is not just the screw here is not just running in a piece of wood and wearing out over time. But it's actually, me being an engineer, I wanted a proper bushing there, a bearing. And this will run forever. I mean, there's now bows out there, 23 years old, and we get them in the shop for rehairs and stuff. They look like new. They work like new. There's no frog wobble or anything?
Well, that's a big thing as well. And there were a few questions about from our customers here, and a lot of them from Queensland. Like, we have all sorts of issues with temperature and humidity and that sort of thing.
Oh, right, yeah,
a real challenge. And we've had 2 years of basically just wet, and we'll have another 12 months of wet by the looks of it, and it can get quite hot, especially in Queensland. Okay. So yeah, we see that happen a lot, where the frog's swelling, or you're having to over tighten it to compensate for various different things, and eventually the frog works its way loose. But what you're saying is, with your with that design, it'd be very, very difficult for the frog to ever come loose. In fact, never. 300 years time, we'll still have the
right. So and our bows are, of course, completely immune to any changes in climate. You can play in Alaska as well as in Tanzania. They don't bother. I mean, the hair, yes, the hair gets longer with high humidity and shorter when it's drier, but the stick is just completely immovable, completely immune to anything you throw at it. It will play always the same. It can actually be quite interesting. A good friend of mine plays a lot of Irish music, and when he plays at a pub, when the evening starts, the climate is still okay, but then people drink and sweat and breathe, and the humidity rises to enormous levels, like you're inside a thunderstorm, whatever. They go up to 100%. And then he told me, in earlier years when he was playing with wooden bows, he really struggled at the end of his concert because the bow was getting weaker and weaker. When he was actually trying to play louder, because people were more drunk, so he wanted to play louder. And then with the ARCUS bow, you can do that. You can just dig harder, and it won't give. So yeah, that works. Okay. It works in an Irish pub. Proven.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. It's getting rather late here, and it's probably time for, what do you do at that time of morning? Broadside or something? Is it time for morning?
Broadside. Yeah, I'll have a second breakfast now. After it was really amazing. I'm so happy to have been here with you guys. And as I said, we're here for the long run. We do this for 23 years now, and we're so happy to have found such wonderful partners in you in Australia now. Let me really explain my thanks and how seriously you got into this bow thing, because our bows need some serious attention, and you give it all. And so you'll be able to I believe, to perfectly provide all musicians in Australia in the best way. So very happy to have you on board.
Yeah.
And again, one more to the audience. Thank you for being here. Do give my little babies a try. I hope you'll be positively surprised. And if you're not, and if you run into any problems, the team at Sydney String Center will certainly be able to handle that. Again, if you really want to dig into the physics or anything deeper, please contact me through our website or our YouTube channel or whatever. I'll be happy to dive even deeper. All right.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. And to everybody else, have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye to everybody.